Hi, everyone. Welcome to the next episode of Joseph's Fireside Chat series. Today is a really special one. I'm joined by my friend and longtime collaborator, now I'll call you, Sateesh Nori, who will tell you all about himself in a minute, but who right now is an adjunct professor at NYU Law School, working in the area of tenancy law. Sateesh, thank you so much for joining me today. It's great to have you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Sam.
Cool. So, first question for those who don't know you, what do you do, and how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, so I'm a lawyer and I work in the nonprofit sector and I represent low income tenants. And I've done this for about 20 years, which seems unbelievable. But here we are. I went to law school in order to help people. I studied human rights law at NYU, and I thought I would be traveling the world and putting out human rights crises all over. But what actually happened was I got a job as a tenant lawyer in Brooklyn right before 9/11. And, um, and I started work in the aftermath of 9/11 and I started representing tenants. And so I watched New York City change and grow as a result of the pandemic, as a result of gentrification. And I became immersed in this kind of fight for housing justice. And over the years, I became interested in using technology to kind of boost the way that we help people, increase our capacity, increase our efficiency, and really be able to do more with less. And so that's what connected me to you and Joseph and the topic of generative AI. And so I'm really excited to kind of take the next steps forward into this new space.
Cool. It's a very admirable career path. And I want to learn so much. Being a new resident of New York City, I want to learn so much about how it's changed over those 20 years. But maybe we'll save that for another day. What, um, what that's quite a challenging career path, right? Like 20 years as a tenants lawyer. What drives you? How do you hold on to that energy?
It's really just one day at a time. I think all any of us can do is wake up in the morning, try to do our best, try to have some impact on some issue, try to make the world a little bit better or make it less bad if we can.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that's driven me is the people that I've worked with. I've seen hundreds and hundreds of people who've taught me more than I could ever learn in a book or in any other context about how to get by, how to survive, how to deal with complex or simple issues. And I've been able to help people in some way and get them through a crisis. And so the time has really flown by. I think it demonstrates that I've made the right choice in my career path because I'm still learning and I'm still growing, and every day is still exciting to feel lucky to be able to do something that's positive, to use your brain and your training and your education to help people. I think it's a lucky place to be.
Mm. It's a great way of looking at it. I'm sure there's dark moments where you don't feel like that, but it's good that that's what's carrying through. I on the second point, I was lucky enough to go to housing court in Lower Manhattan one day with you, um, and I experienced. I mean, I won't share the details, but we experienced this extraordinary case of a woman who'd been through terrible hardships, and you got her back into her apartment that day. Like that was I will never forget that moment. It was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's just showing up. I think
Mm,
that's one of
mm,
life's great lessons is like showing up is more than half of the challenge. And to be able
mm,
to show up on behalf of somebody else who's vulnerable, I think it means a lot. It means a lot to support somebody, to stand beside them in a place in which like they have no idea what's happening.
mm.
But just the power of being, an attorney and showing up to defend somebody can often win the day. And so I can't express how many times I've been lucky in that way to be able to show up at the right time and to have a good impact on something.
Mm. That's a beautiful, I mean, it's just a sort of beautiful theory of change, right? If you think about the space that you and me have been um, engaged in and working on, digital transformation,
Right.
just a big part of that, I totally agree, is the showing up piece. Some people, maybe a more graphic metaphor is bashing your head against a brick wall until you get somewhere.
Eventually. Yeah.
But yeah, a
Yeah.
big part of that is showing up. What let's dig in, because I mean I think that that background is fascinating to a lot of people, but obviously here at Joseph, you know, we work in automation and AI for legal. Um, can you tell the audience a little bit about what we've been working on together over the last year and a bit now?
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest challenges of working as a legal services lawyer or a nonprofit lawyer is to not have enough time, to not have enough resources to help everybody who seeks your help. And so, in a typical day, we might turn away more than half the people who seek our help. And that can be extremely frustrating and demoralizing to know that we could help more people, but for the resources that we have. And so when I came across Joseph and you did a demo for me of the tool, and when I studied Gen AI in general and kind of realized what this means is that we can do 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times the work that we are doing right now. And we can leapfrog like generations of old technology that maybe we never had the money to adopt.
Hmm.
And so things like, having a chatbot that can tell people where to go to assert their rights in court and have it work in English, Spanish, Bangla, Chinese, and have it work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I mean, that's incredible. We could never have imagined such a powerful tool being available to us even 5 years ago. And so to me, it's just a no brainer. We have to do more, and we will never get more resources. We will never get enough resources to be able to help everyone who needs help. And going back a step, the law should be available for everyone. It's a democratic virtue that the law should be free, available, accessible. Everyone should be able to assert their rights or defend themselves in a legal issue, but that's not the case. That's not the case in the United States. It's not the case in many parts of the world. And so finally, we have this tool, and we can turn one free lawyer like me into a machine
Mm.
of 100 people. And so now it's a question of like convincing people, overcoming their fears and their hesitations, and and saying like, let's do this. There's too much at stake. Too many people are falling through the cracks. Let's do it, and let's do it right now.
Mm. What you mentioned there, the people at the end. Um, so you and me have been working on this project with a bunch of organizations. So Cornell is one of them. Obviously, you're at NYU, and a few legal aid
Right.
organizations here in New York City and in upstate New York. There's a lot of people involved. What, I don't want to lead you to an answer, but what are some of the things you've learned from that project about driving this kind of change?
Yeah, I think, first of all, people are resistant to change, and lawyers and people in the legal space are even more resistant
Hmm.
to change. And, we're risk averse people by nature, and we self select into this field in which we are trying to minimize risk for other people, for our clients, and so on. And so when we're placed with something that seems risky, something's put before us, our natural inclination is to say, no, that doesn't work. There's no way that's possible. It's too risky. It's going to be inaccurate. It's going to hallucinate,
Mm.
whatever the case may be. And so I think you and I have learned that we have to be as patient as possible to, demonstrate what's possible for these tools, to show that, human beings are still at the center of any project that we're working on, and to kind of see these tools as like augmentation of what's possible in reality right now. And it's been a hard, long road, but I think we're making a lot of progress. As you know, as we speak, I think there's a lot of things happening that are very exciting. And I think by the end of this year, we are likely to see some huge steps forward, not just in our work together, but in the space overall. I think it's going to be, the end of 2024 and the beginning of 2025 are going to be unbelievable in terms of the advancements that we're going to make, particularly in the access to justice area.
Cool. I like that. I agree. I think the next 4 months are going to be pivotal for this movement, and everyone's just been warming up for the last year. I really like that point you make about centering people still. And when you say have patience, part of me wants to groan, because I feel like we've had patience for decades. But you're absolutely right. I mean, you can't force this stuff, right? You have to bring people on their journey. And obviously the technologist in me and the optimist in me just wants to get it done and to help people because I know people are hurting. But the more sensible part of me, as is counseled by you, knows that we need to bring these organizations, these people on the journey with us.
I mean, one of the things that I've been saying lately is I didn't become a lawyer to work with other lawyers. I don't like other lawyers. Right? I became a lawyer to help solve problems. And it's always been kind of lawyers who are either my adversaries or just are getting in the way. And so, fewer lawyers or less obstacles, less barriers, I think is a good goal. And we have to bring people along. But I think, we don't have to bring every last person along. And some people will never get on board. And
absolutely,
that's a tough lesson. That is a tough lesson to learn.
They're not going to get on board until it's the ship has sailed, right?
But that's probably been the case for the automobile, the elevator, the airplane, the skyscraper,
the steam mill.
Right.
I read an interesting thing about the Luddites, actually. The Luddites in England. They part of that was obviously a grassroots movement, but apparently a big part of it was the industrialists who owned the mills that were built before steam was discovered as something that could power the Industrial Revolution. All those older mills were set up without any of the infrastructure that could use steam. And so they'd invested all their capital in something that was about to become redundant. And a big part of it came from like a top-down push as well to try and stop steam becoming part of the way that they produced textiles or whatever is that they were producing.
It's always about self-interest, huh?
Literally, right? And it's always about the systems. I mean, we always focus on just the individuals at the bottom, but sometimes
I read recently that the treadmill was invented in Victorian England as a method of punishment for debtors in debtors' prison. And I looked it up, and according to the BBC, it's a true fact.
But what's the punishment, that they just have to walk in spot?
Yeah, just had to walk on it endlessly.
That is so good. Wow.
Your debts.
Wow. I mean, God, there's some analogies there with Laura, isn't there? Cool. The AI, coming back to like generative AI, the thing that we've been working on for a long time. What are your hopes for it? Where do you want it to go?
Yeah, I think it at some point it's inevitable. There is this sense of inevitability, as there is with any kind of large scale technology. I think this is a moment like the origins of the internet. That's what we're looking at right now. It's that big. And when we look back on this day, we'll be kind of probably laughing at the hesitance of the adoption of this technology and the fears. Hopefully, unless we're all slaves to an AI overlord. I think what's really going to happen is
either or.
Yeah, either or. Like if we're still around, we will. I think we will see that the mundane tasks of life that we engage in, the scheduling issues, the correspondence, the um, just just the ordinary things that we're doing both in our personal lives and in our professional lives can be done. And what will that free us up to do? How much more creative can we be? How much advancement can we achieve as a species? I think that's exciting. If I didn't have to set my notifications on my phone every day or respond to 200 meaningless emails, or worry about just any basic task that I do repetitively, even as a professional. um, how much more can I do? How much more can I achieve? And in my own personal space, like how many more people can I help? I think that's what it comes down to for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
That's really the goal. Like we all entered into whatever we're doing to do as much as we can, to be as successful and productive as we can. And I think this is one of those ways we can do it. It seems like it's inevitable, but the pace of that inevitability is sometimes seems slow.
Mm. Yeah, it can often seem slow at the start. What's that? The Bill Gates quote, right? You overestimate what you do in 1 year and underestimate in 10, which I think is spot
Yeah,
on. Yeah.
yeah.
What okay, so if our hope is like just to augment our reality, but in your situation and in my situation with these sorts of projects, like help more people. That's our hope, right? What's our
Mhm.
yeah.
Well, I think there's a number of practical fears, people being unemployed, traditional like organizational structures going away, salaries maybe being affected by automation and mistakes. I think that's another big fear that many people have, being
Mm,
let off a cliff by a self-driving car, that kind of thing. And no matter how much data we have about human drivers being worse, like human beings are probably always worse than any kind of automation. I think that's probably a fact.
mm,
The kind of sense of fear is probably much worse in something going wrong because of some process. And there's also other practical fears in terms of bias and discrimination at the hands of machines, algorithmic bias, and people being denied rights and benefits as a result of interactions with machines. But I think many of those interactions are because of the human input into those machines. Like machines are reflecting biases that the people who built those machines exhibit from the onset. So, those aren't necessarily flaws in the process or the system. And that's, the challenge for people like you, and to a lesser degree, people like me who are not technologists, but lawyers, to kind of convince people, these are not flaws with the tech. They're not flaws in the process. They're flawed because we're flawed.
mm,
And, if we can recognize that, then we can start to build things that are, better and more effective and less problematic. But that's a tough lift. That is something that many people may never accept. Um,
mm,
but that's the pace of technology in some ways, and I think the next generation, a generation after that, my kids never lived before the internet. They did not witness 9/11. They have no memory. Obviously, they were not born. They don't, they were born during the COVID era, or they were, alive during the COVID era. And now they're seeing this new technology, AI. And, when they're adults, it's just going to be part of life. This is it. This is how it works. And, how do we set it up for the next generation to make sure that it's, there's some guardrails?
that's exactly right. Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Satish. Like the way that I think about all these fears, right, is these are just risks to design for, like in anything,
Mm-hmm.
like you go bouldering or
Yeah,
swimming or whatever, like
right, right, right.
design it to mitigate the risks to the extent possible, but you get as much value out of it as you can because it's a very powerful technology. There's a really went to a conference in Washington, D.C., which the law firm Fisher Phillips puts on every year, a couple of months ago. And someone speaking on stage was showing they were using ChatGPT, I think just like the publicly available version, as a careers counselor.
Hmm.
And so they input some information. I think they said firstly they were Swiss, and then set out a bunch of like demographic and educational background, and said what jobs could I get, and ChatGPT gave it a list of jobs, and they were kind of like being a clerk or like office something something something. Then he did the same thing, but he put in a South American country, and the jobs came back were service industry jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, this is the bias at play,
Mm.
which is incredibly important to see in action. Like, we obviously need to address that very quickly. But I had a chat to him afterwards, and I said, is that worse than the individual career counselor who we cannot see in an office in wherever, San Diego, Seattle, doling out that advice based on, maybe it's not just like direct racism, but based on their own internal biases? And he didn't necessarily have an answer. But my point was, this is, as you just said, just a mirror that reflects society. But if we can actually see it playing out, and we can build those guardrails in, and we can see how effective those guardrails are at addressing that bad behavior, that seems safer to me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's the like baseline problem. Like we compare the new technology
Mm-hmm.
to like 100% perfect
Yeah.
as the baseline instead of 51% perfect like human beings are,
Yeah.
right? Like, when we work on a hotline project for, a chatbot, for example, what's the rate of error for the human operators on a hotline? We don't even know. We will never know. And all we can say is that, it's not 100% accurate, probably, somewhere in the middle. They probably
Mm-hmm.
get half the questions right. They're guessing, speculating on the other half. And sometimes they're just plain wrong. And so, if we can, compare it properly, we have a viable, case to make. But it's hard to get people to compare something new
Mm.
to the imperfect human or the status quo. Like they will always seem to compare it to, but it's not perfect. You go back to a self-driving car, it's like, but it crashes. Yeah, but human beings crash all the time,
Mm-hmm.
thousands of times. Every minute there's a car accident somewhere. Um, that should be the baseline. But instead, it's like a Waymo car crashed once last month, and let's just talk about
Makes
that.
headlines around the world.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I
The,
mean,
the Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think that brings me back though to something you said earlier, which is centering people, right?
mhm.
I think I when generative AI first came out and we started doing testing internally in our LT lab, and found, there were reliability issues without training, without guardrails, a lot of people went down that path. They were like, okay, but what's the gap between how well we perform and how well the tool performs? Interestingly, I've seen a slight change in um, that dialogue recently. One of which came from Megan Ma, who is a director at Codex at
Yeah,
Stanford.
yeah.
Um, and I think we've spoken about this before, but she was saying everyone originally thought, when self-driving car technology came out and was being explored, and there was billions of dollars being pumped into that industry, they thought that the cars would be driving us around the streets by 2022 or whatever.
Yeah.
Now, most people who work with that technology instead see its future as an augmentation of us as driver.
Mhm.
And so for her, the technical challenges now aren't how do we make self-driving car technology 100% perfect, because that's what everyone was looking at.
Mhm.
Instead, it is how do we obviously make it the best, but knowing there will be some kind of gap, how do we make sure that we have the best trigger for the human to step in?
Yeah.
or alarm system for the car to shut down or whatever. Those safety triggers
Yeah.
is what she finds technically interesting. And I
Yeah.
feel like that's where a lot of people have gotten on the legal generative AI front as well.
Yeah.
It's very,
Exactly
very
right.
much where we've gotten at Joseph.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what's great about what Joseph is working on is building those safety features, allowing some transparency into how it works,
Hmm.
and being able to provide feedback and improve and make it better each time. I think that's really a noble undertaking, and I think it's going to really impact the legal space.
Yeah, we hope so. If we get to work with people like you, it will. All right, final question. I've kept you over time. For anyone starting out on this journey, access to justice, generative AI, automation generally, what's your top bit of advice for them?
I would say just be curious. You don't know what's coming. And
Mhm.
if your mind is closed to it, or you think you've learned everything you need to learn, you're going to miss out. You're not going to grow. And there's no point in, in not growing and not being curious about what's coming. And it's helped me a lot in keeping my mind fresh and my passion and my energy going is to think like, I don't know what's going to come. And that's exciting. It's scary, but it's also exciting. And,
Mhm.
it's easy for a new person entering a field to say, okay, I'm done with my education. That's it. And now I'm going to work. And then I will work until I retire. And then I'll play golf or whatever it is. But instead, think of, the journey itself as a goal every step of the way, every day. Keep learning, keep improving. Um, it's not easy to do that. It's not easy to think that way. It can be exhausting, but I think it's a very good way to approach something, especially in this space where there is such a rapid evolution of what's happening.
Yep, constantly changing. New models out today.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's very exciting. Cool. I think it's a great bit of advice to leave our audience on. Stay curious, everyone. Sateesh, thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing your wisdom with us. I can't wait to see what we build next.
thank you, Sam. Always great to talk to you.